I'm sitting here reading your comments on some of the videos that I've done in the past few days, and it got me to thinking. Welding zinc, welding galvanized material, it can be deadly. It's not something that you want to just do without thinking about it. A couple of guys mentioned how they had zinc shakes and zinc fume fever, and they're absolutely correct in saying you should be careful with it. In my long working history, I worked a lot of places that had manufacturing, I guess you'd call it, manufacturing. Me and the rest of the guys on the crew would do repairs, maintenance, machine repair, building buildings, moving equipment, doing all kinds of things. And there used to be kind of a onus about MIOSHA, Michigan's Occupational Health and Safety Association. They were seen as kind of a pain in the butt. But as I look back, how many times did they save someone's life, including mine? I won't go into a long litany of all the things that I did wrong over the years and learn from the experience. I sometimes wonder how in the world I managed to survive all this time. One of my first jobs was working at a foundry, and foundries have extremely high danger in the equipment that they use. The equipment is just massive. There's sand bins that are 80 feet tall. If you fall into one, you'll sink to the bottom and die. You just don't go into a sand bin. You just don't. But nobody tells you that. They say, okay, we got to do this work. Let's empty the sand bin. Okay, so you empty the sand bin. They didn't always lock out the feed elevator. Now, if somebody kicked that on and started it while you were in that elevator, or while you were in that sand bin, it'd bury you. Because they're all designed to move sand at a high rate of speed. And the idea being to get the process going, because you had massive amounts of everything. Another thing that I ran into, not everybody understands and knows just how dangerous those processes are. I may have told this story before. If I did, it bears repeating. I had been working at the foundry about, 2 months, 3 months. And I was allowed to wander pretty much anywhere I wanted to because I worked maintenance. I was supposed to go take care of any problem that anybody had. But I had no experience actually working at a foundry. Now, I had been walking through foundries since I was 8 years old. I used to take my dad's lunch to work, and on my way to school, I would drop it off in his in the CO2 pouring room where they melted and cast stellite, which is a form of stainless. And I would walk in there, walk in the back door of the foundry, walk through the shop to where my dad was working, hand him his lunch, and then walk on through the shop on out the front door, past the blast furnace and the pouring ramps, and around the guys who were pushing bowls of 600-pound bowls of hot iron, molten iron, through the building, and go on my way to school. That was just one of the things that you did, and that was 1959. So, a long time ago, long before OSHA started, or MIOSHA started. Well, I had worked there, like I said, 2 or 3 months, and I was walking through the plant, and I got out to the charging floor, and I noticed a guy named Danny Johns. He'd been a forklift driver there forever. he came running out of the charging floor just as fast as he could go. And I'm looking in the charging floor, and here's this glowing orange bar across the top of the room, just like somebody took a Sharpie, a highlighter Sharpie, and ran it through the room. And it went over and splattered on the wall. Concrete block wall, went over and splattered on it and fell to the ground. And I thought, wow, what's that? Just then, Danny Johns came running back and yelled, I got to get my forklift. So he ran under the bar of molten iron again, got his forklift, and drove it out under the bar of molten iron. About that time, the bar slowly began to bend and then dribbled across the floor and stopped, went away. And I said, wow, what in the world? I'd never seen that before. What in the world is going on? Just then a red hat, the guy who was in charge of the cupola, the foreman, they always wore red hats so you could tell who the foremen were. He came out of the office and he said, quick, grab that welder. And I said, what do you want to do? He said, I'm going to have you weld that hole up. I said, I can't weld that up. There's water running down the outside of the cupola. I'll get electrocuted. Well, he said, no, you can do that. We do it all the time. I said, well, if you can do it, I can do it. So I climbed up with a stinger for a 400 amp welder that was always sitting there by the cupola, and proceeded to weld the hole shut in the side of the cupola. And I was rather impressed. It worked really well. Welding underwater, the weld chilled right off, so you didn't have to worry about burning through or anything else. I just puddled the hole shut, no problem. Not realizing what the real problem was. Didn't realize it until years later exactly what was going on. I went out to the workshop, the maintenance shop, and ran into my father, who got me the job at the foundry. You're 18, your future's secure, I got you a job at the foundry. That's what it started as. So I said, Dad, did you know you can weld underwater? He said, you can't weld underwater, you get electrocuted. I said, well, you can, I just did. He said, what were you doing? And I told him about what had happened. He left the shop at a run, headed out to the cupola. Now, my dad, on a good day, weighed 180. He was tall and thin. He picked that foreman up, slammed him against the wall, I later heard, and told him if he ever did anything like that, he would kill him. Well, it turns out Dad wasn't worried about me welding underwater as much as the idea that while I was welding that hole up in the side of the cupola, there was 10 tons of molten iron on the other side of that wall. All it would take is for me to go through that paper-thin bit of iron holding up the cupola, that big furnace stack, and all that iron could come right out. No one knew how much of the lining was gone. They just knew that they had 10-ton iron in there. Now, the process was you immediately shut off the blast, and then you poured out all the iron in the cupola into big sows on the floor. You took sand and you made molds that usually were about 4 or 5 feet square, and you just poured the iron out into those, as many as you needed. And then you shut down the cupola and fixed the lining. Supervisor wanted to finish the pour. He didn't want to drop the bottom on the cupola. They stopped charging it, but they put my life at risk without even thinking about it. Now, I'm pretty sure the supervisor had no more idea of what was going to happen than I did. He had no experience. But my dad had. Perhaps he hadn't seen anybody do that exact thing, but he knew that that was a dangerous thing to do, and he didn't want his son doing it. There are a lot of supervisors in the world who have no idea what they're doing. Absolutely none. Now, there's going to be a lot more manufacturing jobs in the United States. And that means that over the past 20 years, we've lost most of them, and now they're coming back. But there are going to be a lot of people that don't know what they're doing. Just because somebody has a red hat on and says they're in charge doesn't mean they know what they're doing. You have to be careful and watch out for yourself. Now, this discussion started because I was welding those zinc channels, the zinc unistrut, and somebody mentioned that I should be careful about zinc shakes. And that is a definite problem. Zinc fumes can really mess you up. They can kill you. Just being in a confined space, not even thinking about it, just walking into a room, closing the door, and being in there can kill you. All it takes is something that displaces the oxygen. I just read something on the MyOSHA website where they talked about two concrete finishers that were working in a building, and they hadn't come back to the shop, and somebody went looking for them and found them passed out in the room. They were working in the cold, and they had propane heater. So the propane heater was in there warming their building for them, and they didn't realize that it was burning up the oxygen in the room, or it was putting out fumes, or it leaked propane, although more than likely it was just used up all the oxygen in the room. One of them recovered. The other one died on site. An empty room with nothing in it can kill you. All you have to do is do something to take the oxygen out of it. So there's a whole thing about confined spaces, and I used to have to teach a class about confined spaces. I kind of got interested in it and looked it up and wrote the script for the story, did the presentation, and taught all of metal powder components about confined spaces and how things could cause problems for you. And I was pleased to be able to do that. But I didn't come up with it on my own. That was something MyOSHA recommended that we did. So, not everything is bad. Not everything is good. You have to keep your wits about you, watch and learn, and just ask questions. This doesn't look safe. I don't want to do that. Now, they may fire you. Okay, you lost your job. But if those two cement finishers had said, this doesn't look good, one of them would still be alive. Well, both of them would still be alive, perhaps. And it's not just foundries, farms, truck driving, snow shoveling. Anything has its risks. There was another thing in there about somebody who was working on a roof, and they had the plywood decking on the roof, and they put a blue tarp over the top of it, and he was up taking the tarp off. Now, no one was there watching him, but he slipped and fell 20 feet and landed on his head and died at the site. He had a harness on him when he was laying on the ground. He wasn't hooked up to anything. He just had the harness on. He chose to make a bad move. And I'm recommending that you don't do that. So anyways, I was just sitting here answering questions and reading the comments from people, and I appreciate all of them. I was trying to be careful, but it would have been a better idea to not have the galvanize on the parts. As Gator told me, he had a guy grind off all the galvanize on his unistrut. I did that at the end. Now, I've been doing this stuff for, well, I started welding when I was about 13, and I bought my first welder because I wanted to make a go-kart. Oddly enough, we were using galvanized pipe, and we ground off all the galvanized so the welds would work better. See how you forget things? I knew that. I knew I needed to take the galvanized off the unistrut, but I didn't do it. I thought, it's just a little bit. I can do this. Fortunately, it was just a little bit. I had no effects from the zinc, and maybe it's just that I'm lucky enough that nothing ever happened that was serious enough to kill me. I've been injured a few times, but never serious enough to kill me. So if you go into manufacturing or anything, look around, see what's going on, and if you see a big glowing bar across the charge floor, don't listen to the supervisor when he tells you to weld up the cupola.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.